This year's Mananatha mission team from Palisades Christian Academy had the privilege of serving the people in Cochabamba, Bolivia. Nestled in a high valley in the Andes mountain range, Cochabamba is the fourth largest city in Bolivia, with well over 1 million people. At an elevation of 8,500 feet, the weather can be very cool at night and very warm during the day. This is the story of our experience, written and read by the PCA students on the mission trip.
After so much planning, fundraising, writing letters, learning, preparing, and praying, at last Bolivia. We landed very early in the morning after an extremely long plane ride. We went through customs and were welcomed by the church members at the exit. It was so sweet. We then loaded our luggage on the large bus and left for retire.
Although we faced many challenges along the course of our trip, I saw God more than ever. He was especially with each and every member of our VBS team and in the kids that we got to work with. Every time we showed up at the 20D October school, the kids would come up and hug us, ready to learn our VBS songs, activities, and crafts. It was so rewarding to hear them, at the end of the week, sing Jesus Loves Me, I've Got Peace Like a River, and many other songs in Spanish that we taught them.
We also taught them English classes in the mornings at school, and they were so eager to learn. I realized that we here in the United States, where the majority of kids, especially the older ones, dread school, take for granted the opportunity of education and the supplies that we have every single day. Most of the classroom didn't have any supplies other than a wipe-off board and chairs.
I thought I would dislike and struggle with helping teach the kids English. Actually, instead of disliking it, I fell in love with it. As the kids learned, I learned as well. I learned to try new things. I learned to communicate without words. I was taught how to be excited about school. The kids that learned from us were incredible. You could look into their eyes and see how they wanted to learn. The teachers and students both thanked us for coming to teach. I hoped that the things we taught will stick with them for a long time.
The most amazing part of this trip to me was the worship talks given by Mr. Springer and some of the other adults and students on the trip. They were so good for me. We learned about living a full life for Jesus. We also sang songs and had team reports, learning each evening what had happened to the other groups during the day. It was a nice way to begin and end each day together, and Mr. Springer always seemed to have the right words to say.
Although we faced many challenges, through it all my faith was strengthened in a way that nothing else could. On our first Sabbath, we bused the 20-day October church members to our retiro for church and a meal afterwards together. Later that day, we boarded the bus to travel to our excursion over the mountains in the jungle. When I was asked if I'd rather go trekking or rafting for my excursion choice, my decision was easy: trekking through the river. On this expedition, we were promised to witness wildlife and really get to experience life in the jungle.
The trekking started out fantastically, as I was collecting cool stones and probably being the most excited person there. Eventually, after hiking uphill for a very long time in the humidity, we started wishing for it to rain. And actually, it did start to rain. It was wonderful, and everyone felt cool and refreshed. But then it just kept raining, and raining, and raining some more. As the water rose in the river past our waists, I kept repeating some spiritual song lyrics to myself. Along with this, I kept thinking of all the memory verses I knew, and it was quite comforting. God answered many prayers that day, and we were finally and thankfully able to make it back to our group through a series of miracles. What we are is God's gift to us. Who we become is our gift to God. Eleanor Powell.
I worked at a medical clinic with Katie Christensen. I had so much fun getting to help people and learn what life is like for them in Bolivia. We treated people for all kinds of problems. I also got to see some really cute little kids and even got to hold a super cute baby. A few days that I was there, I worked with a dentist who let me pull some teeth. It was an eye-opening experience for me because I saw how little some people have.
Working in the dental clinic with my dad was interesting. With lack of proper equipment, we had to improvise. For several cases, my dad could have done the procedure in half the time but had the wrong instruments. We were supplied with a dental van by the Bolivian government so that we could travel to different places. One day we were sent to a special school for disabled children. The experience at the special school stood out to me personally. The first school of its kind in Bolivia, the teachers educated disabled children and fed them. Some of the children at the school also lived there. However, my dad could only treat 2 disabled children because the rest were terrified of dentists. Apparently, a dentist had previously come through and did procedures on most of the kids by holding the children down by their arms and legs and pulling their mouths open.
Most of the people that we saw had terrible teeth. About half of the teeth in their mouth could be extracted. Many children had to have permanent teeth removed. At the school, there are ice cream stands and candy stands. Many children buy candy and ice cream and eat lots of it at school. Most families cannot afford to give their children food for lunch, so they send their children with candy instead. Candy is cheaper than food there. Some families grow their own food, but they sell it in exchange for money for sweets. Dr. Cho worked on a girl whose teeth were so bad that he asked me if I wanted to pull them out. I said yes and pulled 3 teeth out. Laura and I were able to pass out nearly 200 eyeglasses to people as well.
I was the only student who was assigned to clean and work in the kitchen. Mrs. Lund says this is one of the most important jobs because it keeps the team's morale up to have good food and clean surroundings. I got up early to go help cook breakfast each day. Then after breakfast, I would sweep the kitchen and dining room, then wipe the tables. I did this after every meal except for lunch. After I did that, I would go clean all 12 toilets, 6 showers, 4 mirrors, 13 sinks, and scrub floors. I did this most days, especially once people started getting sick. Overall, though, I learned something very important. Life isn't easy, and you have to work hard. I also compared what I did with what Jesus did. People didn't really realize what he was doing for them until it was done and he had died on the cross. In a similar way, people didn't realize how horribly nasty everything would be if I didn't clean the toilet seats or pull hair from the showers.
One of our main goals while there was to build a church for the 20D October congregation. This little congregation has been meeting in a sheep shed for several years now. Before that, they met wherever they could find a place. Their leaders, Benedicto and his wife Anacleta, are so dedicated to this work. After helping with an evangelistic series in this new housing development in the mountains surrounding Cochabamba, Benedicto and his wife Anacleta became convinced that they needed to help this little congregation.
They started feeding anyone who came to church every week. One Sabbath, Benedicto bent over to light the propane stove that someone else had already turned on, and he was badly burned on the leg, chest, and face. In the hospital for months, his wife, Anacleta, was discouraged, for there is no health insurance in Bolivia except for the very young and the very old.
One day, Anacleta was particularly discouraged because someone had faulted on a loan they had co-signed, so they now had that expense as well. She went to see Benedicto in the hospital. "What will we do?" she asked, very discouraged. Benedicto encouraged her as they claimed Bible promises together. Then he said, "I want you to go buy produce and open a stand at the market. Begin selling. God will bless our efforts."
So Anacleta obeyed. She ran out of produce very quickly, so she bought more the next day. She couldn't seem to keep enough food to sell. Pretty soon they had not only paid off the hospital bill and the defaulted loan, but they began to save money to purchase land for the 20D October congregation. God had indeed opened the window of heaven because of their faithfulness. The land that they purchased is the land on which we built their church.
I was on the construction crew. Building the church for these dear people was truly an honor. Since I was also on the construction crew in the Dominican Republic, I was able to jump right in without too much of a learning curve. The church was located at over 9,500 feet, so the building at that altitude took extra air and fortitude. Some days it was rainy and cold, other days it was hot. Each day we began with prayer.
We needed prayer because we faced frustrating obstacles like difficulty communicating with the Mananatha workers, who could only speak Spanish, a few glitches in the building plan, and times we had to reverse or take down some of our work. During the second week, we lost so many people due to illness that we were very discouraged, but it was in those times that God blessed us with patience and endurance.
Anacleta told Mrs. Lenz, when asked on the site visit, that what she really hoped for was an addition on the back of the church so that she could have a place for the children to meet, out of the wind and rain or out of the sun. Generous friends of PCA stepped forward to make that happen, and we were able to get the foundation, floor, and roof of that part constructed. We almost completed the church except for the peaks. Because of the bare bones team, the second week we did the best that we could, but we were unable to finish. We are hoping that another small group can come in and finish what we were unable to do and get the blessing of befriending those wonderful people.
I must admit that at the end of the trip, when we had done all the construction we could, and we had Sabbath service in the church, it was probably the most rewarding feeling I have ever felt. All the people there were actually extremely grateful for what we have done. No one judged us for how much we have completed, or that we didn't lay the block to the best or straightest. All I could see was their deep thanks and gratitude. I discovered that hard work, especially mission work, has its own payment in the form of joy and satisfaction in the job well done.
Looking back, I went into the mission trip thinking I was not going to be affected, but I was. I have a new appreciation for the U.S. and missionaries that do this stuff for long periods. I also learned that willingness is the core foundation in service and being a true missionary, even all the time.
The best experience I had was being a part of the Bolivia mission trip team. The whole purpose of the trip was to serve, and I could really feel that I was a part of something way bigger than myself. I would say that we were not a team, but we were more like a family. We lived together for 2 weeks and did everything else together. When someone got sick and our 4-hour bus ride turned into 12 hours, we all stayed strong and helped those who weren't doing as well. All throughout the trip, we stuck together. We lifted each other up and we bonded together. It was an amazing experience, and I would definitely do it again.
This mission trip to Bolivia impacted me in so many ways. I grew up a lot and learned things about myself that I wouldn't have otherwise. I fell in love with the amazing and strong people of Cochabamba. I learned to trust God deeply and witness His miracles and love. This mission trip helped me find a calling to help people of other countries discover Jesus. I think that everyone needs to experience a mission trip at least once. I am so blessed to have had this once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I pray that I will have more and return to Bolivia to finish God's work.
I had a lot of fun on the excursion trip on the first weekend, and I enjoyed myself in Miami both times, but they weren't as meaningful to me as some of the other things on the trip. The bus ride to Villa Tunari for the excursion was meaningful to me because it felt to me that God was more present there than anywhere else on the entire trip. If we weren't singing praise songs, we were praying for each other. This proves that we grow closer to God through our hardships, which is why I am thankful for this experience. Though there were a lot of fun times and good memories, that particular experience was definitely outside my comfort zone, which is where I am closest to God.
Jesus says where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'll be there. And on this mission trip, I never saw that truth play out more. The power of people coming together and praying was alive, and I saw God work for us in so many ways, even in times when it felt like Satan was stronger. It's in your hardest, lowest point when God's power can become the most evident in our lives. On Saturday night, when they really needed a taxi, David Springer asked us to come together and pray with the person next to us. Barely had we prayed, "Dear God," then our prayer was interrupted by someone announcing that they had found a taxi. At this point, I just burst into tears because that was such a stressful time, and yet there was God right away. I'll never forget that.
Along with all of the wonders on our trip, we also encountered many trials. We had illness and unplanned events popping up around every corner, but through it all, we were able to cling to God, and He was with us every step of the way. Being able to feel God's presence in our most dire situations was one of the most phenomenal experiences of my life. This mission trip not only strengthened my relationships with my friends that went, but I was also able to form closer friendships with people that before the trip I didn't really know very well. But most of all, this mission trip strengthened my faith. I learned so much about myself and about God, and I hope that throughout my life I'll have the opportunity to be able to continue to do mission work. It has been such an incredible experience.